Hi, I'm Lindsay Bennett, Healthcare Executive. Quick question. If I were to ask you to pull the financials for a major US healthcare organization, where would you go? Would you look at the annual report, the 990 report, or the 10K report? Most people would grab whichever one they find first, but if you're using these three reports interchangeably, then you may be missing some important financial data. This video is part of my series on free healthcare financial data and how to use it. And in today's video, I'm going to break down these three different types of reports: the annual report, the 10K report, and the 990 report. And by the end of this video, you're going to know how to find things that most people don't even know exist. So whether you're trying to build a pro forma financial statement, or if you're looking for free benchmarking or compensation data, let's get started. In this video, I'm going to cover these three reports, tell you the difference between them, and I'm going to walk you through real examples of them. And if you stick around until the end, I'm going to tell you how to get my free resource, which covers all kinds of free healthcare data sources for benchmarking. It covers a lot more than these three, and I'll tell you how to get that at the end. But right now, let's start with this example of an annual report. It's important to know that the annual report is a marketing document. It is produced by the company, and it is typically read by shareholders, potential investors, employees, the media, and the public. So it's branded. As you can see here, it has pretty photos, and it typically will start with a letter from the CEO or the board chair, and it will highlight the year. It will probably give you some community impact stories and a high level summary of financial performance. So here, if we're looking at the table of contents, you can see it starts with the letter from the CEO. And you can already tell from the table of contents that they have some community stories, some individual patient stories. Here they mentioned the first mobile MRI of its kind. And over here, they're talking about advances in patient access with online scheduling. They're talking about groundbreaking gene therapy, innovative deep brain stimulation, etc. So you can kind of get a sense of how this flows. And if I skip ahead to page 42, they are going to give me select financial data, which is usually a condensed income statement, balance sheet snapshot, and some key ratios. So this section in different annual reports can be a little bit thin. It typically will have things like revenue and net income and maybe operating margin. So here they've given you a little bit of information about revenue and expenses, but it's not a full profit and loss statement. They've given you a really high level payer mix. And if I scroll down, they're giving you some statistical data like the total inpatient days, admissions, average daily census, ER visits, outpatient visits, surgical cases, etc. So in the annual report, you're basically going to find operational highlights such as new facilities, acquisitions, service line expansions, some quality metrics, maybe some patient volumes. Now, I did a whole separate video on the 10K report, which I suggest that you check out if you want to know how to navigate that and how to find the exact data you're looking for in every report every time, because that report can be 300 pages long. So it's good to know how to navigate it. So let's talk about what is covered in the 10K report at a high level. We have the business overview, which is a detailed description of the company's operations, business segments, facilities, payer mix breakdown, regulatory environment, and competitive landscape. For a health system, this might include the number of licensed beds, outpatient visits, surgery volumes, and the revenue by segment. Then we have the risk factors, which are super helpful if you are doing due diligence or if you are building a pro forma, because it tells you exactly what management is concerned about: reimbursement risks, labor cost inflation, regulatory exposure, litigation, and things like that. Also, you have the MD&A, which is management's discussion and analysis. And this is where management is explaining the financial results. So what it's doing is it is bridging the narrative with the numbers, and it's covering things like revenue changes year over year and what's driving that, the effect on margin, cost drivers, capital expenditure rationale, and so forth. Also, the 10K report is going to give you the third-party audited financial statements. So the income statement, the balance sheet, the statement of cash flows, the statement of stockholders' equity, and typically you're going to find 3 years of comparative data. And it's also worth reading the notes in the financial statement because they are going to give you detail on things like lease obligations, debt covenants, litigation reserves, related party transactions, revenue recognition policies, and bad debt methodology. Also, the 10K contains segment reporting. So when you have large health systems that have different businesses, so for example, you might have private duty in-home care and a Medicare home health business, and those different components will be segmented out, which is important for benchmarking. Okay, so now we've covered the annual report and the 10K report. But if you look at the chart on this slide, you'll notice that almost 60% of hospitals and also a large portion of all healthcare organizations are nonprofits. So they aren't publicly traded, and you're not going to find a 10K report on their website. So where can you get their data? If you go to their website, you might find an annual report. But did you know that almost all nonprofits are required to file a Form 990 with the IRS every year? The Form 990 is also called the Return of Organization Exempt from Income Tax. And every major nonprofit health system has to file one annually. And it's publicly available by law. And some of the places that you can find it are ProPublica Nonprofit Explorer, the IRS Tax Exempt Organization Search at irs.gov, Candid, which used to be GuideStar, and also on the organization's websites. Now let's take a look at the Form 990, and I have pulled this from the ProPublica website. And as I mentioned earlier, this is not as pretty as the annual report, but the format is the same always. So when you're comparing nonprofits, once you're familiar with the format, it's very easy to find what you're looking for. And we are going to start with Part 1, which is the summary. So as you can see here, it says Part 1. And this front page gives you a quick financial snapshot. It is going to tell you the total revenue, the total expenses, the net assets, and the total assets. And it's also going to show you the number of employees and volunteers, which is useful for workforce benchmarking. So if you're trying to back into a staffing model based on size, that would be one place to start. So you can see that here we have their different types of revenue in this section, lines 8 through 12. They've got the prior year, they've got the current year, and they break it down into contributions and grants, programs and services revenue, investment income, other revenue, etc. And then we get into the expenses section, which is lines 13 through 19 here, and they have some high-level categories as well. I want to call your attention to section 7, which is where they disclose the compensation of the highest paid officers, directors, trustees, and key employees. So here's where you're going to see the CEO's compensation, the CMO, the CFO, major department heads. And this is publicly available data. So if you're doing compensation benchmarking, or you're trying to understand the leadership cost structure of a competitor, you're going to find that in this section. So they've listed the names out here, and then they break out the compensation by category. Next, we're going to move on to Part 9, the Statement of Functional Expenses. And there's a lot more in this report, by the way. I'm just picking out some highlights to share with you. But here's where you're going to find salaries, wages, and employee benefits, payroll taxes, professional fundraising fees, other professional services, occupancy costs, travel, depreciation, etc. Benchmarking. Then we have Part 10, which is the balance sheet. So this is a full balance sheet. It is the beginning and the end of the year, and it has their assets, their liabilities, and their net assets. So you can track their asset growth, their debt load. You can look at the net asset position year over year. I want to call your attention to Schedule H, which is hospitals. It was added specifically to document how nonprofit hospitals justify their tax-exempt status. So it requires disclosure of charity care, of Medicaid shortfalls, community health improvement services, health professions education, subsidized health services, research, etc. It also includes information about charity care policies, financial assistance eligibility thresholds, and whether the hospital bills patients at gross charges or something else. Now we're going to look at Schedule J, which is supplemental compensation. And this is a deeper dive on the executive's compensation. And it discloses things like housing allowances, travel for companions, club memberships, first class travel, etc. You can find that here. This is Schedule R, which is related organizations, and for large health systems with complex structures such as subsidiaries and joint ventures or foundations or captive insurance entities, Schedule R is what lays out the organizational map. And this is critical when you're trying to understand the full consolidated financial picture of a system that might file multiple 990s across their various entities. What you're seeing on the screen now is a free reference guide that I've created to free publicly available sources of healthcare financial data. So if you go to the description, you'll see a link to join my email list, and I will send this to you and a lot of other helpful tools. Thanks for watching this video, and if you found it helpful, please take a moment to like and subscribe. In the description, you're going to find links to my free mailing list where I give you access to all kinds of tools and templates and training. And I'll also share the links to the other videos where we dive into free healthcare data sources. Thank you.